Welcome everybody to today's Moving to the Cloud Under Pressure Roundtable. My name is Vittorio Viarengo and I'm delighted to be your host today. Cloud transition has been going on for many years now, and COVID only accelerated things. And because of this, there's been unprecedented pressure on IT to deliver results, to deliver the cloud under unprecedented conditions. So today, I'm delighted to host 3 customers who adopted VMware Cloud on AWS to address these challenges and move to the cloud at unprecedented speed, leveraging both the familiarity with the VMware environment, but also being able to access and leverage the underlying native characteristics and capabilities of each of AWS. So stay with us because we're going to go deep into the challenges, the best practices, the obstacles, the solution that got these customers over the hump and into the cloud, and really learn the lessons that you can then leverage in your own journey to the cloud. So without further ado, let me introduce my esteemed guest today. So I have Shannon, Henwood, the head of technology at Iselect, Neill from the Scottish government, he's the head of infrastructure there, and Nikola Zarecki from Equinix, and is a senior principal architect at Equinix. So welcome everybody. Thank you for being with us and sharing your stories with our customers. So let me get started by asking you to introduce yourself, your company, your team, and kind of your experience in using VMware in your existing environment on-prem. Nikola, you want to go first?
Thank you, Vittorio. So yeah, my name is Nikola Zarecki. I'm the enterprise architect with Equinix on the corporate IT side. We have been using VMware for extensive time already now, I would say 10 plus years, likely, longer than I have been actually, working in this company. And given that background and the opportunity that has, arisen, within the last 2 years, that VMware has actually provided a new offering, right? A new cloud offering. We have decided to actually move forward and migrate into the cloud. And we have completed that task, within the projected time of about 10 plus months. So I'm speaking now when the whole migration has been completed, and I can definitely, I'm eager to share with you all of our learnings and all the experience we have gotten along the road.
Perfect. Neill, you want to go next?
Sure, thanks Vittorio. Hi, I'm Neill Smith, Head of Infrastructure for the Scottish Government inside the Agriculture and Rural Economy Directorate. I manage a multidisciplinary team from standard sysadmins to DBAs, identity management, cybersecurity and automation. Similar to Nikola, we've been using VMware for 10 plus years now. We started consuming VMware Cloud on AWS a little over a year. Primarily the use case was for disaster recovery and to start tearing down our physical DR sites and start utilizing VMware Cloud on AWS.
Perfect. And Shannon?
Hi, Vittorio. My name is Shannon Henwood. I'm the head of technology for an Australian-based company called Iselect. I look after the desktop admins all the way through to architecture, security, engineering, and everything in between. Similar to both the other 2 gentlemen, we've been using VMware for about 10 years. And oddly enough, when we decided to pull the trigger, we were existing on a cloud journey, but when we decided to pull the trigger to go to VMC, it took us 4 weeks. We had a bit of pressure to get it done, so we really ran an accelerated program.
Great. So we're going to get into all the details of how you got there. But and it's great that you guys have been using VMware for many years because like many people in the audience, we're probably in the same position. And like many people in the audience, I'd love to understand what was the business driver or the technical driver that had you move to the cloud. Let's start with Shannon this time.
Okay, cool. So as I mentioned, we're already on a cloud transformation, and I think most organizations can probably quote the same, that you're on the journey to get to cloud, whether that be cloud native or cloud services or a hybrid combination of the both. So we were probably about 18 months through, and we were actually focusing a lot more on native. So looking at our applications and refactoring them as opposed to just straight rehosting them. In about March of this year, we had an event where we basically needed to expedite the move to cloud, particularly for some of our storage and infrastructure. So what we did is we basically ran a very, very, very accelerated program to basically lift and shift all of our core applications across over into the VMC environment. We put some really big pipes in there so we could move the data across. And we also put an additional layer of DR in place. Because of the way we could configure our VMC environment, we could almost go active-active. So we really changed our RPO from almost halved it actually in what we could actually achieve if we needed to.
And was the DR requirement accelerated by COVID, or was just there lingering?
A bit of column A and a bit of column B, to be quite honest. If it wasn't for COVID, I probably wouldn't have done it as fast, to be honest. But the change event that COVID has presented and the elevation of IT in certain areas to really enable parts of the business just gave me another acceleration point, if you will.
Yeah, and Neill, I know you guys have a kind of cloud first
Yes.
program going on in the Scottish government. Can you tell me more about what drove that?
Sure. Extremely similar to Shannon. We have a cloud first policy where we have to analyze all new requirements and see if they fit the cloud. One of the drivers for us looking at VMware Cloud on AWS was primarily the DR use case. We were coming up for a hardware refresh at our DR site, and also our contract on the DR building was coming up to expire. So my decision was, do I want to go through a traditional CAPEX spend for a hardware refresh, rack, stack, configure, and then take that out and move it to a new physical DR site? So the decision that I made a little over a year ago was to move that out into VMware Cloud on AWS. Again, similar to Shannon, we were extremely aggressive in our timescales. This was obviously pre-COVID. My initial use case was to try and take a legacy Oracle Spark application and virtualize it, and then take it from an on-premise virtualization and run it into VMware Cloud on AWS. And then once I'd proven that concept, I then used the DR scenario for that entire end-to-end application to prove that we could take a legacy application, virtualize it, and then run it into VMware Cloud on AWS. And similar to Shannon, we managed to complete that exercise in a matter of weeks. So it was a real fruitful proof of concept that showed the power that we could get from VMware Cloud and AWS.
I love that we're teasing the audience by giving the goods, right? We went into like 2 months, like 4 weeks. We're gonna get to how we did that in a second. But
Sure,
Nikola,
yeah.
what was the push for you to get to the cloud?
So I would say this is, in our case, our environment, which was previously, right, pre-migration was definitely, all of it was on-prem. It was a very traditional enterprise environment. And suffice to say that actually it was a fairly large, environment that we own and support, that consists of more than 2,000 VMs, about 215 the prods, and 1715 in a non-prod environments, distributed over 21 environments. And we were able to actually, so our plan was a little bit more extensive, right? So we definitely took our time to get to where we are today. The whole plan started, I would say, 2 years ago, when we looked around and did the pre-selection, right, of the possible cloud environments. And along with VMC, we have a couple of other public providers that we considered, right? VMC turned out to be the selected environment, and we did a pilot prior to migration, obviously, just to make sure that all of our apps are actually suitable for this migration. And it did turn out that some of the apps had to remain on-prem. So I would say that our hybrid cloud that we host today is sort of a result of a fairly long and comprehensive, set of testings and thinking, right, about what to do, right, and how to migrate. Now, what I want to say is that what were our drivers, right? So so we have a fairly small team in IT that provides support for our, infrastructure. And so all the usual, suspects like provisioning delays, challenges with the uptime, the maintenance overhead, and then the unacceptable MTTR, along with a very lengthy manual process of ordering and setting up the equipment, kind of drove us, to move forward, to go faster in the cloud than maybe some other enterprises. And then what we have gained, I can speak maybe now to that, what we have gained with this migration now, we have this one-click provisioning. That's kind of an end goal, right, in any provisioning system. The agility to actually migrate faster, back and forth between on-prem and in the cloud, because we are running, as I said, a hybrid setup. Then we have our resource optimizations. Many enterprises, when they run systems on-prem, don't really pay much, as much attention, right, to the resources. So over time, the infrastructure accumulates to the point where you just have too many things around and they're not being effectively used. And in the cloud, you definitely have to go through that, you have to run through that exercise to trim out the deadwood and definitely use, to be financially savvy, right? You have to do this exercise. And then the backup in DR is kind of is definitely one of the goals. We get to use all the goodies, right? That we get with our prods. Also, they transpond also to the DR, right? So we have a pretty effective use of resources in the DR environment as well. And then finally, I would say reliability that the cloud provides, and is something that all the enterprises, I would think, and all the IT teams are looking forward to.
It seems to me like DR is a common thread, and also with COVID, the inability to procure hardware fast enough kind of accelerated. I know that Shannon, you've been struggling with that as well. The one thing that's interesting, I would love to talk about more, because all of us in IT always have this challenge of dealing with developers, right? The developers kind of started this journey to the cloud years ago and started to build new applications over there. And now we are coming and rehosting existing applications and moving them to the cloud for the reasons that we talked about. So talk to me about that relationship between the developers and how you guys partner with them to say, okay, we're going to the cloud, but hey, let me put some guidelines on how we're going to go there so that we can actually manage this environment. Shannon, you want to go first? I know that you've been.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. I probably don't have as much friction between the developing group and the infrastructure group, because we're a very, very small team. There's probably in that area, there'd be lucky to be 20 people combined. But what we've managed to be able to do is to build what I call muscle memory. So we've picked small activities. Yes, we've got native stuff that we build net new in the cloud. But when we're moving the older applications across, what the infrastructure guys and the app guys have been able to do is kind of come to this agreement that we won't break anything. So as part of the migration of EMC, one of the things that we really loved was we didn't actually have to change anything. We could retain all the old IP addresses. So in any application that had been hard-coded, if that was the case, with specific IPs, just could be lifted and shifted across. And when we built that working relationship to say, okay, we're not going to break anything, the apps guys and the infrastructure guys started to build a better bond together. So now when we start refactoring things, it's more of a collaborative activity. And I'm seeing some of the infrastructure guys getting more involved actually in the development process, so they can start building the infrastructure more as code, which is where we want to get to eventually. Everything to be more native. And I think, Neill, you touched on it as well. The more we can build that muscle memory and the more we can build a confidence, momentum in what we're doing in that transition, that we're gaining speed. So yeah, I think we've got a nice, again, I think it helps to be a smallish team, pretty much co-located in many instances. Well, actually, we were co-located in many instances that work together.
Cool. And Neill, what about you?
So the government came a little bit late to the agile DevOps style game. So we were very traditional. So there was a little bit of a disconnect between my team and the developers. At one point, we had a large number of developers, almost 80, building our applications. As we began to mature, we started to adopt more mature methodologies and making agile, being more DevOps. But then that helps us go as a collective journey, and Shannon's spot on with that. My infrastructure guys are now taking a lot more interest in coding to get down to that infrastructure as code, that software-defined data center where we all want to get to, right? And where VMware can help us with the VMware Cloud Foundation. So my guys now are really exploring, they know Java, they know Node.js. For the automation, they love Ansible. And it's just working, now understanding the developer tools and their techniques, they can work a lot closer together and we can all help each other. And there's a real kind of bleed now where we can all kind of learn our unique roles and actually share that with the collective team, but then also work closely with the business to try and give them what they want rather than doing that traditional waterfall method that the government and most governments, I think, around the world are traditionally always seem to go about: get your requirements, build it, then show it to the customer, and then they end up going, no, that's not really what I wanted. So the government was a little bit slow to that, but we're now maturing. And as we mature more with the vSphere 7 coming out, or being out, is the containerization and the orchestration of that. And that's something we're really trying to drive, and my infrastructure team are really trying to drive that. And traditionally that would be led from the developer, that'd be more developer centric because they want to do containerization. But from an infrastructure side, we can see the huge value in that, and then running those containers to wherever we decide to move them in an infrastructure aspect.
And now with vSphere 7 and VCF, you can run containers and VMs side by side, right? And you can actually use Kubernetes to orchestrate VMs, which is very powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
And Nikola, I know that your front-end team moved to the cloud first. Do you want to talk about the relationship there and how that worked?
So yes, maybe I should highlight that everything that I have been talking about so far relates to the back office stack, which is our, traditional monolithic apps. It's actually a mix of homegrown and off-the-shelf applications. Actually, there's more than 20 applications in that stack, all of which belong to our back office stack, and that is what we have migrated to VMC Cloud. Now, a second part of our app stack is the front end, right? The web, customer-facing, part of our application stack, and that is going in a different direction. They have actually concluded, and it's actually way more modernized than our back office stack. And it was a very good use case for a public cloud such as AWS, which is where they're migrating over. That process is currently ongoing, and I'll probably have more news to share maybe in a few months. But one thing I will say that they already have migrated or modernized their application stack, so which means exactly what I think Neill mentioned. Most of the apps are already containerized from the infrastructure standpoint, and they're actually, moreover than that, prior to that, actually, they have been redesigned and ported over into the microservices, right? They are not, one, blob of one blob set of application, monolithic app that requires a waterfall, as I said, development process. So on our back office side, we have migrated in a traditional lift and shift for the most part, fashion. We've migrated, most of our applications have been like exactly lifted and shifted, obviously along with very thorough testing, right, to see how that works in the new setup. However, we did use the chance, and I would advise any other enterprise customers to do the same, to explore specifically, actually in both sides, whether that's a homegrown app or an off-the-shelf app supported by a vendor, they should look and explore the option to modernize that. Nowadays, a lot of vendors provide multiple options, right? Not only, obviously the traditional monolithic app has been around for the longest time, but also containerization option, right? Microservices redesigned option is there for some vendors, as well as maybe some SaaS or PaaS offering. So just look and see what might be a good use, right? And modernize your stack. I will use this chance to say that we have TIBCO, which is our middleware. We use that, our Q stack to exchange all the messages between our applications. We use this chance and we find the value in actually porting over that application from a standard monolithic setup to a containerized microservices based distributed application. And that definitely showed some benefits.
If I could jump in on that, one of the comments that Nikola made, I think it's really, really important to really double click on it, is that by moving and getting your lift and shift done, you do have, it buys yourself the freedom, and I'll call it freedom, to be able to really analyze your application suite to go, you know what, this is a really great candidate to be able to do this. You build that resilience in the VMware stack or the VMC stack to buy a whole bunch of time that you don't have to worry about DR, you don't have to worry about uptime because you know that it's just there to then go and modernize what you need to. So you're not having to kind of fight fires while you're trying to build out the new stuff. It's really important that you build that stability. And we found that VMC just gave us that in spades really quickly. So we didn't have to worry about the stuff over there. We could actually focus on what the future was bringing. So I think it's a really valid point, Nikola.
Yeah, we were 100% the same. I kind of use the phrase, we only move to the cloud when it's architecturally the right thing to do. Because there's a real drive to just put it in the cloud, just put it in the cloud. And that's not necessarily always the right thing to do. You look at each requirement at face value. Does it run on a physical server? Does it run it virtualized? Does it run in VMware on VMware VMC? Or does it run on native cloud? But just look at those requirements and then just analyze where it fits best, whether that's for performance or cost, etc. There's numerous other government departments that I've learned from where they've raced to the cloud and more native cloud. And now they've kind of almost just replicated virtual machines on premise to EC2 instances, to give the AWS example. And you know what, that can almost be, or on a large percentage, a false economy. And that's not where we want to be at, or certainly my team want to be at. So I'm very keen on that, and where VMware Cloud and AWS gives us that flexibility is to say, hey, no, we can run it on an AWS data center, but it's just going to be under the VMware Cloud and AWS, and it gives us that time to move it out whilst we look at maybe refactoring or exploring even further. We consume native cloud services now, and we went for a 100% serverless solution, which was brand new to everybody. But it was excellent. So day two operational overheads are kind of non-existent, but it's suited going native cloud. Whereas that example wouldn't have fitted. We would have had to have over-elaborated something on-premise or VMware Cloud and AWS. So yeah, it's a line I always kind of push out to the government, the central government, is look at each requirement and understand where it fits best for whatever that purpose is.
So let's get into the meat of the discussion, because you guys have been using VMware Cloud on AWS to move to the cloud with amazing results. So let's get into the why you chose VMware on AWS, and then some of the how, right? You know, we as a marketeer, I go out there and say, hey, using VMC on AWS, you can literally vMotion your application into the cloud. And then I talk to you guys and say, yeah, it works. I say, yeah, fantastic. So let's put some meat behind that ability to use a familiar environment on-prem, now moving into the cloud, using the same skills and all that. So tell me the why and the how you use VMC on AWS.
So
me to do that one? Or?
Yeah, I can start if you want me to, right? Yep. So there's definitely a set of criteria, right, that contributes to that selection, right, and how you get to assign, how do you get to select the cloud where you move, right, to migrate. Nowadays, obviously, there is a large selection of public clouds, and enterprise customers are really looking, I think, into the set of these public clouds to find a way which one is the most suitable for them. The criteria we followed, right, in our selection process had to do with the following, I would say. First off, the public cloud readiness of IT services for our back office stack, which is in our case, we call it EcoStack, and I think I mentioned that before. And then VMware Stack was really built, for the traditional IP applications, right, because it supports VMs, it is the traditional environment, and a lot of enterprises such as such as Equinix have been using VMware for a long time, right? Even though I have to say that we didn't use a full-blown cloud stack, which consists of ESX technology, right, as well as the vSAN, so that is the virtualized compute, but along with that, virtualized network, NSX, and virtualized storage, which is vSAN. So previously on-prem, we had been only using actually ESX technology. We didn't have we didn't use virtualized network or storage. In fact, we have been using, EMC for storage for the most part, and then standard Juniper gear, in a standard fashion, right? Appliances, routers and switches, for our network. So I would say that the enterprises who have been using even VMware Stack to a larger degree, right? In all these pillars, can obviously accomplish even bigger and larger, layer of integration, between the two, between on-prem and the cloud. But I think that would be probably one of the major governing, reasons why would you want to select VMC, right? Provided you were a VMware enterprise, VMware customers before. And along with that, I think I would say that the maintaining consistency of the applications in the infra environment, right, before and after, helps it. Now, regarding the overhead reduction, right, which is what the clouds provide you, VMware actually fits right there. Like I said before, one-click provisioning, agility to maintain and remove your host and add more on per need basis is something that usually takes longer time, but obviously in the cloud that is much faster. And in fact, I would say that most of the enterprises are looking forward to go in the cloud with more predictable resource consumption. In our case, we don't really have really large peaks and valleys. Our usage pattern doesn't oscillate as much. So we have actually moved forward with a subscription model, right, rather than on demand. And that really works well for us. And I think in that regard, we can achieve great savings.
And you had 2,000 VMs. Did you move them all?
Yes, we have migrated all of those VMs.
How long did it take?
For us, like I said, because we did a very extensive planning and we did lots of associated work, in terms of testing, took us more than 10 months, close to a year. But again, that was both prod and non-prod. And actually, we are currently hosting all of our 2021 environments on about 155 hosts, and we were able to achieve about 30 to 35% reduction in the in the resource consumption compared to on-prem.
What about downtime? Did you have any downtime as you moved the applications?
We did have some challenges, and I would rather talk about the lessons learned, if you allow me to do so, because that is definitely one of the things we learned along the way. Yeah.
And Shannon, what about you? Why VMC on AWS, and kind of some of the stats and how you did it?
Yeah, cool. I might start with kind of what I was talking about earlier on, the journey that we actually had planned. We had a 3-year plan to transition workloads over to either be cloud native or cloud-based services. Our predominant system was already a cloud-based system. It's a CRM, and I think you can figure out one of the biggest CRMs that we use. But we were looking to say for more of the back-end stuff, and for our digital, we've got a very large digital platform that was all sitting in VMware in data centers. So what we were looking to do is, okay, what was that transition period looking like? So we actually did a proof of concept for VMC earlier on this year. And I probably shouldn't say this at this type of forum, but we actually decided to not continue based on the proof of concept. There was a couple of things that I wasn't overly comfortable with. There was some cost issues that I was trying to deal with. There was some performance issues within our application that I was trying to figure out. It just didn't quite work for us because we knew that we had time. Fast forward to March, when we had a different event happen and COVID was starting to hit, we knew that we actually had to do something different. So we, similar to Nikola, we did some planning, and I must admit it was a bit of an accelerated planning that we did over a weekend to basically say, okay, if we were mapping, and we don't have anywhere near the volume that you do, Nikola, so we only have about, I think it was about 400 VMwares that we need to move across. So smaller scale, clearly. But we basically planned it over the weekend what that would look like, designed the patterns of what we would do and how we would migrate over a weekend, did a sample workload into a kind of a single, a kind of 3x3 hosting type environment, proved that it all worked out, went and did some creative financials to make sure that from a cost perspective that I wasn't blowing out one line item to actually fix another line item. And then we basically, over the course of 3 weekends, moved all of our workload, I should rephrase that, all of our critical workload. So all of our digital platforms, so our entire web presence, all production, all dev, moved across. Our integrations, our custom integrations, all moved across. And I said before, the thing that we loved is no IP changes. So for us, there was actually no outages. We used our load balancer to say, okay, push the load to this box while we move, finish that move, righto, reshape the load across. So we actually could have done it during business hours, but being a bit conservative, we chose to do it out of hours and over the weekend. So 3 major weekends and some workload over the weekend. We were pretty
Shannon,
much.
I think you're selling yourself short, because I'm sure there are many people in the audience right now that are thinking 400 VMs, pretty much the size of my organization. And what you're saying is that you did one. Maybe you're super smart and I'm amazing people, but
I wouldn't go that far.
You plan for a weekend, and then within 3 weekends with no downtime, you move 400 VMs, which you call mission critical to the cloud with no downtime. That's an amazing achievement, I think.
And we added DR in place because we could, because it was easy.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. And I think that's I love, one of the reasons why I'm an engineer, and now I went to the dark side. I'm in marketing now. But one of the reasons why I'm comfortable doing marketing at VMware is that this stuff works. It's just amazing, right? You remember when I first, somebody 15 years ago explained to me a vMotion, I said, get out of town. That doesn't work. And then they showed it to me. So holy crap! And now we're doing the same, but from on-prem to the cloud, which is incredible. So Neill, what about you? What was your experience with the VMC on AWS? And by the way, I love that if you had challenges in doing it, like Nikola talked about, just bring it on, because we want to keep it real, right? We're talking to a practitioner that have their job on the line when they do these things. So.
Sure. That's hugely impressive, Shannon. So I was talking some impressive numbers, but the volumes that you went through and how quickly was, that's awesome. Just a quick anecdote, Vittorio, on the when you seen vMotion for the first time, and I was the same when we were doing VMware Cloud on AWS, and we were experimenting and playing. One of the examples we could see is we could do a vMotion from it's the AWS London data center, and you could ping it all the way over to Chicago, I think it was, via vMotion. And it was just like, wow, this is incredible. It's going over the Atlantic now, right? Rather from data center to data center. Anyway, I think I said earlier on in the presentation here that one of the key drivers were hardware renewal at the DR site, and the contract for the DR site was expiring. So that was the main drive. Given that both Nikola and Shannon, similar as us, we'd invested 10 plus years into VMware. So our teams, I imagine, not speaking on their behalf, but certainly from my behalf, was our teams already have that VMware knowledge. So it made perfect sense to use VMware Cloud and AWS because you've already invested in that technology. So the switch is always going to be easier. So I said earlier, we took a proof of concept. It's how I like to operate. Take proof of concepts, let people see what you've done, and then roll that out to a bigger picture. So we took that legacy Spark workload, virtualized it, then ran it on VMware Cloud and AWS, and then ran all the applications in that application stack as a DR scenario. Totally truthful and being transparent. Those applications were relatively simple to transform and modernize and then get it into a virtual platform, then VMware Cloud and AWS. We still have some legacy applications, which are a challenge. So I'm not painting this picture where, inside a few weeks we were whoosh straight over to the other side. That's definitely not the case. But it gave us the capability of, as the government matures, we mature into VMware Cloud and AWS. Some of the challenges would be, we had some real challenges with connectivity. So we had to, the main challenge on migrate or communicating with our on-premise to VMware Cloud and AWS was our network communication. And I had to work with a separate team, a core government network team. And that was what probably cost me the most time. There was a lot of challenges there because it was an outside team. And the second challenge would be licensing. I probably should have spent more analysis on that. So we have a large Oracle estate, both on physical platform and on our virtual platform that we were maturing into. So obviously, when we moved those workloads into VMware Cloud and AWS, you don't get a choice on the hardware underneath per se, or the size numbers. We run some.
Welcome to the cloud. Welcome to the cloud. They don't choose the hardware.
Correct, right? So we had to really analyze on the number of licenses we had, particularly for Oracle, to what we were running in VMware Cloud and AWS to make sure that we weren't going to have to procure more software licenses for Oracle. We run JBoss middleware for a Red Hat estate. So it was just getting a closer understanding of, hey, from an infrastructure point of view, we can do this, and we can do it relatively straightforward and simple. But when you start going that granular on the application stack and seeing how that licenses, because a lot of it's core-based, etc. So we had challenges there, understanding on how we can make it work. So that was one of the key challenges for my team.
So let's talk about that for a second, because all of you have done a POC before doing this, right? And now, knowing what you know, what would you say that the people in the audience should test in a POC? Because Nikola, you also had connectivity problems, right, in terms of latency, because you kept your Oracle on-prem, right? And Neill, you kind of experienced the same thing. So if you had to design the perfect POC based on what you know, what would you say you have to test? Connectivity and in license.
I would
give us the recipe.
So Vittorio, thanks for that. And actually, I think Neill, hit it first. I would like to highlight the role of connectivity, right? Interconnectivity. I mean, modern IT landscape is very complex. It consists of some SaaS offerings, also has some cloud offering in terms of PaaS and IaaS, but also homegrown applications, right, on-prem, maybe some off-the-shelf applications along with that. So that whole, hybrid multi-cloud setup, I would say, has, relies on interconnectivity, right, to connect to that. So the SaaS part, is easily connected, right, because that's all publicly available on the internet. And some parts, obviously, on the application side of some app services also available publicly. But as far as IaaS goes, right, infrastructure as a service, enterprise customers still heavily rely for performance reasons as well as for security on private links to interconnect their offering in the cloud to their on-prem resources. So I would say that Equinix has been challenging in that regard. We have several applications are fairly chatty. They don't tolerate long latency and they require some fairly large bandwidth. So, and networking QoS services as well. So in that regard, we have been actually, that's why we had a fairly thorough, like I said, testing process to get and really understand how our application stack works and which applications demand, these extended criteria, right? And those actually we had to pay special attention on, and we defaulted them back, to stay on-prem. I would also say that Equinix is a fairly unique enterprise customer to VMware, because obviously it's a data center company, one of the largest data center companies in the world, and we own infrastructure in that regard for connectivity, in particular. We have what's called ECX, right, which is our, connectivity service, which provides connectivity between the customers sitting in our, cages in our data centers and cloud and telco providers, as well as connecting our customers to their on-prem resources. So we obviously have used our own service to achieve the highest level of redundancy that we can get, and I would say that is time and money well spent, because like I said, with this hybrid multi-cloud setup, a lot depends on those networks, and you have to be very prudent in setting up those and testing those before you move, right?
As you say, start from the application, make sure you understand the requirements of the applications, and then do a POC that reproduces that, and then you're going to find the bottlenecks and the things that you need to.
Right. So we ended up actually achieving three levels, right? 3 levels of redundancy. Our primarily connectivity, which is already redundant in itself, because Equinix ECX provides, HA within the service. So we already have like two level of redundancy with ECX connectivity between our on-prem resources and VMC on AWS. Our second, I would say, a totally independent service that use, as a redundant connectivity service is AWS Direct Connect. And our final, resource is Equinix Internet Exchange network that allows for VPN connectivity, which is our final resort. If both of these, in very unlikely case that both of these connectivities fail, both at the same time. So I think that's like I said, the money and effort very well spent. A lot depends on that network and connectivity, and I would say in the future, that whole scenario, that whole complex setup is going only to become more complex. That's what I see.
Especially as we're going to live in a hybrid world going forward, the connectivity is going to be a bigger part. And Shannon, what's your recipe for the perfect POC? To prove this?
I'm not sure there is such a thing as a perfect POC, but there's definitely a lot of learning you can get from a POC, which I agree with Neill. You do need to do the concept to prove that the idea works. I want to touch on a couple of things both gentlemen said. Connectivity, absolutely critically important. Understanding your app landscape, how they talk to it, chatty applications, critically important. We'd done some pre-work. So we'd done some pre-work on what applications actually interacted with each other. Prior to or as it was part of our cloud planning, actually. So we knew that certain workloads had to go together. So we knew that in advance. And in that design period, we knew that this section of the network stack had to go together. This section of the application stack had to go together. But we also did a really quick exercise. And look, I mentioned before we did it pretty quickly, but we did it with a lot of help. We had AWS come and help us. We had VMware come and help us. And that design session on the weekend, we had all of the right people in the room that could make the decisions. And being the head of tech, I could actually control each one of those areas. So if a decision needed to be made around infra or connectivity, I just made it. So that helped me as well. But what we did is we did a plan to see if we had a pipe this big, how long it would take. And it actually worked out to be months. If we had a pipe this big, how long would it take? And it turned out to be a lot smaller. So our prerequisite to move was to make sure that the connectivity to move stuff was in play. We upped it to as much as we could get, and we used AWS Direct Connect so we could actually move stuff a lot quicker. We had that in play, that was provisioned, then we hit go. We finished the migration, we throttled it back down. So, and Victoria, Nikola and Neill, you both talked about it at length, that planning piece, getting those plan right so you know what you're doing in what order. We got most of that information out of our POC. Because our first POC, like I said, it didn't actually work that well, but we learned so much from it that we knew that when we had to work at pace, and actually we had hard deadlines, that we'd already kind of worked out what we didn't know and we focused on that. Because I think you've all touched on it, moving a VMware from X to Y using the tools, that works. You don't need to prove that. It's kind of fun to watch it go across the pipe. That's kind of fun. And the percent go, ooh, it's done. You knew that worked. It's the unknowns that we focused on going out of the proof of concepts. It's the unknowns that we focused on in our planning session so we could run faster.
Right. Any other best practices that you want to share with the audience that you learned in the process?
I'll just jump in quickly. I can't iterate enough that you need to get the right support to do this. There's folks that have done this before. There's folks that have failed. There's folks that have learnt a lot. You're not the first. Don't think you are because you're not. Don't think you're the most unique because you're not. Go get support. Ask for help. Listen to your peers. Seek feedback. If there's someone in your network that, as in people network, that has experience, leverage it. It's probably my biggest tip, to be honest.
So I would say also amongst the lessons learned, along the way that we had, I would, list a few, right? So first off, given that this is primarily infrastructure as a service migration, right? And we have kept all of our replication layer, intact. I would say that you need to learn really about how your target infrastructure looks like. You need to get into deeper into the design of it, which I have to admit, we didn't have enough info, when we started this, and along the way, we didn't pick up as much as we hoped for, to learn that. But we have a few outages post-migration or towards the end of the migration, I would say, on some of our, luckily, non-prod environments. And what we have learned is for example, this is VMC on AWS, right? And think about it. This is VMware stack that sits on AWS infrastructure. So you need to learn AWS infrastructure, really, to know where are you migrating towards? And the reason I'm saying this, traditional enterprise-grade infrastructure that has been designed for on-prem, applications, do not really resemble, what AWS has on their own infrastructure, land. They have, they don't really like this, but I'm trying to find another word for it. But they have some point of failures, right? Single point of failures that we have identified, and they're changing that. They're definitely adopting, to the enterprise customers, to the enterprise VMC customers. But you have to understand that, and you have to basically add some HA redundancy, I would say. So add some HA on your upper layers, right? Primarily on load balancing, and also design your infrastructure to begin with to be redundant. My point is, what we have ended up doing is we're deploying in 2 different data centers, meaning in 2 different AWS availability zones, which map to the different VMware SDDCs. So, and you need to be able to fluently migrate things over, right? And VMware, one-click provisioning helps you with that, right? So you don't need to build fully redundant. That is the beauty of the cloud. You don't need to have 200% of your resources deployed, right, into different data centers. You can split mainly half and half, maybe with some padding on each side, but you're able to quickly provision additional resources if need be. But you need to be able to steer the traffic accordingly, depending on the availability of the resources in each part of your cloud, and definitely plan for HA in that regard, right, on the data center level. So I would say that is probably, if there was a single message I want to say to the customers, is do that sort of HA planning right up front, and you won't be regretting, right, moving forward.
Neill?
So, just quickly from me, I totally agree, Nikola. Shannon, 100% agree in terms of, reach out, ask for help, whether that's through AWS, VMware, your social network of people I'm a firm believer on, running those POCs, allowing mistakes. Mistakes will happen. We're all human. You learn more of the product by making mistakes. And like you said, when you run the POC and you prove it after all the challenges you've had, then when you go to implement it in real life, you've kind of already overcome, and the people already know the product so much greater. Allowing the ability for people to create to make mistakes and then to learn from it makes the actual proper implementation far easier. So best practices is mistakes will happen. Just roll with it, learn with it, and reach out and ask when you need help, because there's lots of people out there that have done this numerous times, and it's better to tap into their experience and listen, and people are more than willing to share.
One thing that I want to double click is that both Nikola and Shannon have mentioned this, is because some people have this perception that if you put VMC between you and AWS, then you cannot really access the underlying infrastructure. But you mentioned the usage of the dual zone. You want to elaborate a little bit of that? Because our message is always that you get up the ability to use the familiar environment, but you can still use the underlying differentiated features of AWS.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll quickly go, just finish speaking. 100%. So we now encourage our developers to explore more native AWS services from VMware Cloud and AWS over that Elastic Network Interface and that direct connectivity through there. So it now enables our developers to start exploring more, to start consuming. So there's a definite traffic path through there, and we're building that into their learning development curve in terms of what they can use and consume. So I'll leave it there and let the rest.
I'll be a really short bit, and actually almost summarizing what Nikola said, is that yes, because you can use the native features of AWS to go multiple availability zones, it's a click button within the console to enable your workload, critical or other, to actually replicate across. You don't do anything, you just say yes. And if you set up the environment to say this is critical workload and this is the RTO or RPO that you're wanting on that workload, click next, done, walk away. And that's just native AWS feature for availability zones. Nice and easy.
We have been challenging that regard also so there is, like you said, as the previous 2 gentlemen said, there are native services to be used, right, to be had and used by the customers. So challenge your current on-prem infrastructure setup in design architecture, right? Don't blindly just fold over everything from on-prem and port it over to the cloud. That's not the way to go. Definitely go service by service to all the native applications. And when we started our migration, VMware or VMC on AWS didn't have as many, but I think that number of services, native VMware services, is increasing over time. And take the time to explore each one of them and challenge your current service. For example, in our case, that was the load balancing by F5, which is a very traditional enterprise-grade load balancing, vendor, excuse me. And native services usually, right, obviously by the rule, they are integrated into the management console, right? And they are aware of all the other, services provided by the cloud, at least on the infra side. So, and more importantly, there is a centralized control plane that's distributed, right? At least within the region, if not globally, right? And that is what you can take advantage of. Some appliances, such as, like I said, load balancing by F5 or any other, right, are very localized, right? Their control plane cannot be stretched across the region or not even across multiple AZs. And we have been challenging in that. We have been challenged in that regard. And what that does, it prevents you to optimally utilize all of your resources that are scattered in multiple data centers or even globally, right? So that is where you need to take advantage of the native services and also take advantage of the monitor, not just of those services through the unified management console, but also through the monitoring that is available, which is some sort of a closed feedback, right? So you can automate and do better. I mean, we can now go into the automation and how, the cloud provides some improvements there as well, as opposed to the, on-prem automation, stack traditionally used by the IT staff. But I think that's maybe beyond the scope of what we have.
Yeah, and I just checking the time. The time really flew. I think that you guys have some great stories and best practices to share. I'd like to close just maybe, what's next, in your journey? What do you think is next in your journey, and how is are you planning on using VMC in that or not? Let's see what the future holds.
Okay, I'll just go quickly. So we've just finished last week deploying NSXT. Going to deploy vSphere 7 and then get down that software-defined data center route and start exploring the VMware Cloud Foundation, the VCF. That's the kind of strategy moving forward for us.
Shannon?
For us, it's continuing on the cloud journey that we're all on. We'll look to have more applications go native. We've got a couple of monoliths that we're looking to decompose, and I use that word specifically, and make them more modern. And we just keep executing the journey. And it'll change. We'll scale up in certain areas and we'll scale down in other areas. Our business will change. But I think we've now got the flexibility that if we need to scale really quickly, we can do that. If we need to scale down really quickly, we can do that. So just continue the journey.
Nikola?
So on our end, we have a pretty exciting, right, pretty exciting milestone, right, that ahead of us now that we have completed migration to VMC. So the next big thing to do is to actually look and continue modernization, right, of our application stack. So getting away from the monolithic apps and moving forward, right, with the containerization on the infra side and moving to the distributed application stack, achieving higher level of AHA globally, would be one really big and large task ahead of us. Second thing that actually is kind of works hand in hand with developers, actually help developers to get away from the waterfall model, right, and do more agile development is the automation, right, that the cloud allows you. So utilization of the API interface, right, hand in hand with the greater automation across the board is another large milestone, and we're exactly these days we're looking into the design that really fits our needs. So those two are definitely the first one we're going to be working on next, probably for the next I would say a year or two, to really take the full advantage that the clouds allows to the customers.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for participating in this panel. You share some tremendous best practices for our customers. I believe that if you are a VMware customer, VMC on AWS is the fastest way to get to the cloud. You guys confirmed that, no downtime, moving hundreds or thousands of VMs to the cloud in unprecedented time is really compelling. And With that, I really thank you again for your time, and I leave our audience with the rest of the fantastic session that VMworld 2020 provides us. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.